Hi, welcome to All Things Breastfeeding. This is Barbara Robertson, and I am the host of All Things Breastfeeding and the co-founder of LactaLearning, private practice IBCLC. And this week I'm joined by my LactaLearning co-founder, Nancy Mohrbacher.
Good morning, Barbara.
Hello. And so today, Nancy, we're going to be focusing on, Nancy and I have been working on the next edition of Breastfeeding Answers, so the third edition. And we recently finished the chapter on induced and relactation. And so we thought, well, we should share some of the things that we learned while we were doing it. We truly do read all the research so you don't have to. And so
It's true.
so we feel very up to date and informed. Certainly not experts on this. Honestly, Elisa Schnell will be talking about her later. She wrote Breastfeeding Without Birthing. We'll talk about her. And then of course all the families have actually done it. But Nancy and I, we know a lot. And so we wanted to share about what we do know. So one of the things when we did this, we were working on this chapter, was new definitions
Right.
of induced lactation, relactation,
Mhm.
because before you used a definition, and so talk about the what we were using and what we're
Right.
using for this edition.
Yeah, when I did Breastfeeding Answers second edition, I went to some of the other textbooks, and the definition that I found for relactation was someone who has ever been pregnant
Hmm.
is considered to be relactating when they're trying to bring in milk.
Yeah.
So in other words, even if you're bringing in milk for an adopted baby and you breastfed a previous baby, that would be considered relactation.
Right.
But I found a resource that has started in 2018 called Lactopedia,
Hmm.
which is a definition website. It's free and accessible to anyone. And it was created by people I respect, the researchers at the University of Western Australia that used to be led by Peter Hartman and is now led by Donna Geddes.
Hmm.
And so I looked at their definition, and it's I know you and I have talked about it, and
Right.
you've used their definition, which is different from
Hmm.
that one.
Right.
So in other words, what the way they talk about relactation and induced lactation is different. So relactation is bringing milk back for the current baby
Hmm.
that someone has given birth to. So in other
That's
words,
their definition.
it's the birthing parent or the mother, who had the baby, and it might not be right away.
Hmm.
Maybe there's very little milk because usually, in my experience at least, it takes years for the milk to completely go
Right.
away, where you can't even express drops.
Hmm.
So there might be even just drops there, but that is still going to be relactation if it's the baby, the last baby that
Hmm.
she or they just gave birth to.
Hmm.
So that's different. And so then what that means in terms of induced lactation previously was the bringing in of milk of someone who's never been pregnant,
Hmm.
and now it's bringing in milk for a baby that you didn't give birth to.
Hmm.
So, uh,
Right.
so it could be someone who has breastfed in the past,
Hmm.
but is maybe adopting a baby now
Yeah.
or what. Yeah,
Yeah, or having a baby through surrogacy
right,
or
right.
something. Maybe their partner had a
Yeah.
baby, and
And
yeah.
I pondered these definitions, and I think the reason why the previous definition came about was because there's a feeling like once you've been through a pregnancy and
Hmm.
your breast tissue has increased,
Hmm.
that gives you an advantage in terms
Yeah.
of bringing in milk over someone who's never gone through the hormonal changes of pregnancy.
Right.
However, I think you and I know in reality, having worked with many families, that
Yeah.
it's really not so easy for somebody who really their breast tissue has involuted, meaning gone back to its pre-pregnancy state.
Hmm.
It's going to be hard no matter whether you breastfed
Right.
before or not. It's not going to be like someone who's just had a baby.
Yeah. It might be a step easier, and it probably is, but it's
Maybe,
still right. This,
but we
these are
haven't.
back to our studies that we don't have,
Right,
that would
right.
be really
So we don't
interesting.
know for sure if there's a difference. If there is a
Yeah.
difference, it's probably not a major difference. That would be
Yeah.
so that was one of the reasons I thought, we probably should switch to this
Hmm.
Lactopedia definition because I think, when you're looking at it from a practical standpoint, it makes more sense to
Hmm.
use those definitions.
All right. Well, why would somebody, let's start with relactation. Why would somebody relactate? Why do we need to know about this?
Well, it's back in the old days, I started in breastfeeding in 1980. Women would relactate then primarily if their baby was allergic to formula. That was
Mm,
what we would see at that time. However, of course, the world is a whole different place now.
mhm.
But that, and sometimes it's just that, someone, who started off breastfeeding, they stop for whatever reason they stopped and they have really serious regrets.
Yeah.
And they think, I don't feel good about this. I'm not happy that I'm not breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And and so they want to give it another try.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a health concern, but sometimes
Right.
in the beginning it can be so overwhelming, especially
Yes.
if there was some surgeries or complications,
Right.
and maybe the parent didn't get a good start. But
Right.
then at 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks,
Right.
they're like, you know what? I really would like to do
Right.
this.
Or maybe they got bad information and someone
Right.
told them that for
Yes.
whatever reason, because,
Yeah.
heaven knows women are told for all kinds of reasons
Yeah.
it's impossible for them to breastfeed. I mean, my mother was told you can't breastfeed because you have inverted nipples. And we
Mhm.
know that that's not true. So
Right.
it might be that they learned, oh my gosh, the reason I was told I couldn't breastfeed isn't actually valid.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, how about induced lactation? What kind of folks induce lactation?
Well, there's a whole wide range these
Really,
days.
there is, right?
Yeah, again, back in the old days, it was an adoptive mother,
Hmm.
almost always, who was
Yeah.
inducing lactation.
Hmm.
But what's happened over the years, I mean, I think one of the first innovations was the reproductive technologies,
Right.
where we have the biological mother who's having a baby by surrogacy,
Hmm.
but who wants to breastfeed her baby. So that's someone who's not experiencing pregnancy,
Right.
but still wants to breastfeed, and it's her biological baby. So
Yeah.
that's one. But that now we also have, we have the whole LGBTQ community. And so you might have two, for example, female partners, and maybe they want to share, they want to co-nurse.
Hmm.
They both want to breastfeed. Or you have a trans woman
Hmm.
who feels strongly that she wants to experience breastfeeding.
Hmm.
Maybe her partner is,
Hmm.
having the baby. I mean, there's just all kinds of different
Right.
possible scenarios there.
You could have somebody whose child has cancer and it's even though the child is now several years older, they want to provide
Yeah.
human milk.
Or they have
Um,
some other relative who has some
yeah,
terrible disease and
right.
they think human milk would be a plus for them.
Human milk is so powerful. It
Mhm.
actually is, it's, I think as time goes on and we discover more and more how it can help, that's going to be more of a thing. But for
Yeah.
the moment, yeah, so those are the common reasons. All right, and so then let's say you want to relactate or induce. There's some differences between relactation and inducing lactation, but there's
Yeah.
some similarities.
Right.
Um, so like starting with skin to skin, that would be
Right.
universal. Baby
Right.
bringing the getting the baby to actually breath the breast, expressing milk, hand expressing. But there
Right.
is so back to Alyssa Schnell and
Mhm.
breastfeeding without birthing. She's come up with since she wrote that book this
Mhm.
three-step framework. And
Mhm.
so let's talk about that because I feel like that's just it's straightforward and just like
Right.
in a nutshell kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's really great what she has thought of because, I know you and I both know this from working with many families that not everybody wants to do things in the same way. And
Absolutely.
so let's say you have someone who's inducing lactation, um, and they have strong feelings about one aspect of it. So it
Hmm.
gives them, it's like a menu, it
Hmm.
gives them options, different ways that they can approach it. So like the first step relates to preparing the breasts to make milk.
Hmm.
And that might be something as simple as breast massage or, during, sexual relations, have the partner, sucking at the breast or, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But it's just a way to increase the hormones that might prepare the breast. From a pharmaceutical standpoint, it might involve taking birth control pills,
Hmm.
which is something that, was originally proposed by the Newman Goldfarb protocols back
Right.
in around 2000.
Hmm.
Uh, and that might build breast tissue like a pregnancy.
Hmm.
So that would be step one. Do you have
Hmm.
more? Maybe, yeah. Or there's also, I think, some galactagogues that are known
Hmm.
for building milk making tissue like goat's root.
Right. And so this also depends on how much lead time you have. Because for the
Right,
birth control protocol, there's a long protocol and
right,
there's an accelerated protocol.
right,
And
right,
some people want nothing to do with taking birth control, some pills, some
right,
people are all about it.
right.
And so
Some
that's a
people hate the idea of like herbs and natural
right.
uh,
I'd rather take a
substances.
prescription pill. Right.
Right. And some people want neither one.
Yeah. So
They just don't
again,
want to
just
they don't want to deal with any of it. Yeah.
okay. And so then what is step two? So step one is kind of preparing the breast. Step
Right.
two.
Step two involves starting to make milk.
Hmm.
And so, for example, let's say you're a mother who's having baby via surrogacy,
Hmm.
and you have 9 months or so to prepare, or even 6 months. You can do all these step one things, but then when you start to get closer to the baby's arrival, you
Hmm.
might like stop the birth control pills, start taking galactagogues, and start pumping
Hmm.
somewhat intensively. And I think
Yeah.
this was actually Alyssa's personal experience because she adopted a baby, and by the time her baby arrived, I think she had enough milk, you
Hmm.
know, to exclusively breastfeed. At least that's
Hmm.
that's my understanding from reading
Yeah.
her
This that
material.
was, but caveat that was not her first baby.
Right. So
She had
she
nursed previous
so
children.
she may have had what we discussed
Right.
previously, the
I know she
advantage
may
of
have had an
having,
advantage. So we
right,
don't know.
right,
Right.
right,
Yeah. So it could be at this point, we would want to stop our birth control pills if we were taking
right,
them. We
right,
might add prescription domperidone. We might
right.
add goat's rue. There's some other ones that
Other
people might
herbal
consider.
galactagogues, yeah.
But then we get some hand expressing
Right,
and
right,
pumping involved. So we start to
right,
actually remove the milk, really
right.
get it going. And
So this
sometimes,
person is not pregnant, so
right,
they're trying to start their milk production
right.
before the baby actually arrives. So when the baby comes, there's going to be
There's going
milk.
to be milk there. And usually they're saving whatever milk they get. And this is where, so sometimes I'll have a client that has struggled with fertility for 9 years.
Yeah.
Some never able to get pregnant, some get pregnant but then lose the baby right away.
Hmm.
And that person is probably going to have a harder time getting it going than someone like Alyssa, who's already previously nursed a baby. So getting that history
Hmm.
is just super important.
Hmm.
Somebody like yourself that has your magical breast, you had some physical
Yeah,
challenges,
I had one breast that didn't develop. I
right?
had a sternum that was deeply indented, and I had a breast implant put in. So
Yeah.
I really, when I had my babies, I did get a little milk out of
Mhm.
the side that didn't develop, but nothing like what came in my other breast. Luckily for me, I had one functional breast.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be a different kind of a story too.
Yeah. And so really making sure that we understand the situation thoroughly
Mhm.
before we start sharing information is always a good
Yeah.
idea.
I was always grateful that I was only blessed with one baby at a time.
Right, exactly, because that could
I
have been
didn't have a
tricky.
spare like most people
You could
do.
have, right. And then, so what is our next step after this? What is
So
step
then when the
three?
baby comes,
Hmm.
step three is then breastfeeding,
Hmm.
and then trying to boost milk production if at all
Right.
possible. So what's it's interesting because sometimes people get confused about this and they think, they have a baby, but they think, no, they have to start with the birth control pills, blah, blah,
Mm.
blah, and go
Yeah,
back.
no, no,
But
no.
no, no, absolutely
We
not.
don't want
Having
to
a
do that.
baby who's breastfeeding
Yeah.
is like the best. Because I mean,
Mm.
I had a good friend who breastfed an adopted baby, and she didn't do anything to prepare because this was like 20 some years ago.
Hmm.
Back then, we didn't know about steps one and two. And
Right.
so she just got a nursing supplementer, an at breast supplementer, and had, milk in it. And, her baby got the milk that he needed that way. And she was able
Mhm.
to boost her milk production just from nursing with an at breast supplementer.
Yeah. And so again, this can look a lot of different ways for
It
different
can.
people.
You can
Um,
you can use some of the other tools too. Like for example, you could use the prescribed galactagogues or the
mhm.
herbal galactagogues.
Right.
Um, what I think most people would say is not necessarily to put a focus on pumping because when you have the baby there, that's
Mhm.
probably not how you want to be spending a lot of your time. I mean, when you were working with
it's hard to
families.
get to, even if you
Yeah,
want to.
exactly. Yeah, because
Yeah.
you don't want to create a lactation plan with someone and give and have it include more than is humanly possible to do.
Mhm.
So how would you handle that when you were working with families in that situation?
So it really depends on if you're able to get the baby to latch. Because if
Hmm.
you can get the baby to latch, an at-breast supplementer, which people, there's a steep learning curve, and so we understand
Yes.
that. But if you can get your baby to latch and feed
Hmm.
your baby at the breast,
Hmm.
it takes triple feeding. So that means nursing the baby maybe, and then supplementing the baby, then expressing milk after to boost supply. It makes it one step. So the
Right,
baby is having time at the breast, they're being fed their supplement, and they are stimulating more supply.
right,
And so if you can do that, that is the way to go. But it
mhm,
depends on how old the baby is when you adopt them or
right,
end up,
right.
because some babies are reluctant to latch. Although, Carleen Gribble,
Arlene Gribble.
she adopted older babies because in Australia,
Right.
you can't adopt a baby until they're 6 months, I believe.
That's correct, between six
Yeah.
and 12 months. And that actually was really interesting. I got to meet with Carlene when I was over in Australia at one of my visits there. She and I spent a day together, and absolutely, to me it was like hugely eye-opening because in this
Mhm.
country at the time we were so obsessed with nipple confusion, and if a baby got a
Yeah.
bottle, they weren't going to be able to breastfeed. And
Ever.
yet
Right.
here in Australia, the babies, who had been bottle fed for 6 to 12 months were still making the transition to breastfeeding. Because as we know now, babies are hardwired to breastfeed.
Right.
That there's can be tricks to making that transition,
Mhm.
but it's certainly not an impossibility. This is what babies were born to do. So
Right.
so that was such a wonderful thing to hear about her experience. And she's
Yeah.
done some wonderful research on the emotional part of it.
Mhm.
Babies who maybe were in institutions like
Mhm.
orphanages, and how breastfeeding, in the new family can really help to heal emotional wounds because there oftentimes is trauma associated with adoption, especially of an older baby. And how, this can really help a new family bond.
I had a client and she had two children and then she adopted a third. And so she was still
Mhm.
nursing her um second baby when she adopted the third. And we could not get him latching. And so I don't know. And she did everything right. She spent so much time skin to skin with him. She practiced Safe Sleep 7. She would
Mhm.
bathe with him.
Mhm.
Um, so she used pace bottle feeding. She did it. But then when he was two, all of a sudden they were out hiking and he asked to nurse. And he did nurse. And then he nursed like a newborn for about 6 months and almost drove her crazy.
He was ready, huh?
Yeah, he was ready.
Well, I
And
know we have one point
yeah.
in Breastfeeding Answers where we talk about the importance of first establishing the relationship with the
Hmm.
child before attempting to nurse. And
Yeah.
2 years is a long time to
two
take
years
for
is a
that.
long
But
time.
maybe for
Yeah.
that particular child, that was what he needed
That's
to
what he
finally say,
needed.
I'm going to be comfortable nursing with my mom.
Yeah, exactly. But she was just like blown away. We had stopped working together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's a lovely
So
story.
I think that again, there's lots of options as to bringing
Yeah.
in the milk, but as we know, frequent effective milk expression is number one. So if we can
Frequent
get that
milk removal,
baby,
one way or the other.
yes.
Yeah.
But if we can get the baby at the breast to do it, that's fabulous. But if
Yeah.
not, we do need to do some pumping, Nancy, or
Right.
some hand expressing. So
Right.
often that is part of my plan, um, depending on how it's going with the nursing. If we can get that baby nursing,
Right.
it's kind of like,
Yeah.
whew, all right,
Right.
all
And I
right.
know Alyssa said to me that when she was a reviewer for Breastfeeding Answers Second Edition,
Mhm,
and she said that what she will say if the baby is there is that she might suggest that the parent, when they're on the toilet,
mhm,
just try to express some milk
mhm.
with hand express. Obviously you wouldn't save that milk, and
Yeah.
you'd wash your hands afterwards, but it would just be a way to stimulate more milk production. So something simple like that. But she said normally she does not encourage heavy duty pumping, if the
Because
baby's
yeah,
nursing.
there's just not time
Right.
for it. It's
Right.
just like, but unfortunately, if the baby is not latching, we do
Right.
need
That's a
to do
different
some
story,
instruction.
obviously.
But
Yeah.
I think though that that's where like frequent. And so
Hmm.
maybe just standing and pumping for 5 minutes or a wearable pump might be great if it fits well, because then
Yeah.
you could just turn it off and on and kind of mimic a newborn frequently feeding.
Yeah.
So, yeah, lots going on. And so, with the research, one of the things that we found interesting was the galactagogue piece.
Hmm.
Because here in the United States, we're like, oh, you've got to bring in the milk through medication or galactagogues. But some of the places where they were most successful,
Right.
galactagogues weren't a big part of it. So, talk about
That's true.
what did they do?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it has to do with cultural beliefs, I think.
Hmm.
That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
I think so
Because
too.
because in places where it's expected that you're gonna like have your baby on your body more or less like around the clock,
Hmm.
and that breastfeeding isn't something that you do on a schedule. Bottle feeding bottles are not used. When babies are supplemented, they're supplemented by spoon or cup, so they're not getting their sucking urge, satisfied with the bottle.
Yeah.
Places like that, they tend to be a lot more successful
Hmm.
at bringing in milk for both relactation and adoptive
Yeah.
nursing or induced lactation. So yeah, but it was interesting because there have been some articles published that actually review specifically the prescribed galactagogues that are used for the induced lactation protocols.
Hmm.
And it was there's a lot that's controversial about using domperidone because in some countries it's used very freely, and countries like the United States where we live, it's really sort of forbidden by the FDA. Canada also has had cautions because for a certain group of people,
Hmm.
uh, domperidone, when given by IV, has caused heartbeat irregularities, and so it's that piece is they looked at it and they did say that there are safety concerns around it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Metoclopramide or Reglan is the other drug that sometimes is used, and that one, has its own set of safety
Yes.
concerns
Yeah.
because especially if you take it longer than a month. I remember
Mhm.
I got an email once from someone who had been taking it for lactation related issues, and they developed a complication called tardive dyskinesia, which is involuntary movements that don't go away once you stop.
No.
They're permanent. They're permanent
Yeah.
neurological problems, and
Yeah.
so that's a can be a serious issue. So usually, also the other problem with metoclopramide is that one of the side effects is depression. And
Right. That's
I've
a big
worked with
one. Hmm.
families individually, who've had this as a side effect.
Yeah.
And typically if that's used, it's suggested you not use it for longer than 1 month for sure.
Right. Yeah, because domperidone is contraindicated with people with heart issues for
Right.
sure.
Right.
And then
And
Reglan is contraindicated with people with mental health concerns,
right, right.
and long-term use is not
And
recommended.
there's also some question about the use of domperidone with obese
Hmm.
individuals. So
Yeah, a lot we
yeah,
still don't know.
there is.
All right, so yeah, the breastfeeding without birthing, Alyssa Schnell's website
Mhm.
is quite good. We also knew,
You probably want to put links to that down
yeah,
below because her
we
name,
will.
it
We'll have
may
them in
not
the
be
show
obvious how to
notes.
spell it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Schnell.
Yeah.
And so the other thing, though, that was new for this was the amount of research on transgender women
Yes.
inducing
Yeah.
lactation.
Yeah. It's been interesting because there's groups of people in our world today who have very negative feelings about transgender women.
Yeah.
And I came across that recently with somebody I know personally. I will say, just, to be clear, my husband's best friend is a transgender woman. So we have actual, personal experience with this. And it was disturbing to me to hear, some of the things that people say about transgender women, one of which, is about the breastfeeding piece.
Hmm.
And there's been questions in the past, is this milk
Hmm.
suitable for babies?
Hmm.
Which, my initial response to that was, well, these are human beings. I mean, nobody worries about cow's milk being
Right. I
suitable
know.
for
Right.
or goat's
Goat.
milk, or
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that it's going to be human milk. I mean, that seemed obvious to me, but now we actually have studies to
Hmm.
show, because they've taken samples and they've
Hmm.
tested it, and they found that yes, it actually, not surprisingly, is human milk, and
Hmm.
that it is adequate, for baby's
Right.
growth. So I
Yeah.
think we can certainly set that concern to rest.
Yeah. And people worried about the hormone levels that transgender women might be taking, and they found that
Right.
to be an issue
Yeah.
as well.
Yes. So they
And
looked at that
yeah.
too. So yeah, so that we actually do have studies on that. So it is actually safe for babies to get the
Hmm.
milk from transgender women.
Yeah. So those of you who are worried about that, the answer
Yeah.
is we're okay.
Yeah.
And Nancy and I believe people should be able to be who they are, and
Right.
that's okay with us.
Yeah.
And so we're here to support them.
Yeah.
All right. So that was an interesting change from our last edition as well. So yeah. Well, so Nancy, again, we've had a lot of change. Our definitions change. We have some new ideas.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you're interested in inducing lactation, we'll have some, or relactating, we'll have some resources in the show notes. And Nancy, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this issue.
You're welcome, Barbara. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So if you're enjoying all things breastfeeding and you'd like to help us out, we'd love it if you would go to your favorite podcast listening device and give us a rating. Reviews help us move to the top of the list so people can find us easier. So yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.